Hi, I'm Zyn, and I love Pokemon very much. Even though I wasn't allowed to have the video games as a kid, I did have a well-loved collection of cards that my friends gave me, and sometimes I got to watch the anime. For me, Pokemon is tied to learning experiences and connection. The nicest people in my life were those who were happy to teach me all about their favorite Pokemon and answer all my questions about the world, the games, and how it all worked. Even within the games, bonding with friends is emphasized, which is a beautiful thing. It should also be noted that the English intro song has the line, "You teach me and I teach you," shortly before belting out Pokemon! So yeah, Pokemon is pretty great. I also love learning about languages and cultures, and I like to make up fun strategies for memorizing information about them. So I don't forget anything. One day, I was reading through the Lushootseed dictionary, and I was talking to my little brother about words I didn't know. Quick backstory time. I found out a few years ago that I am from a Native American tribe I had never heard of before. I grew up in Virginia, and I had to move to the Pacific Northwest to live closer to my people after I took my DNA test. Since then, I've been studying our culture and our native language of Lushootseed. So, me and my little brother, who I had just recently met, were talking about how to pronounce the names of animals. Together, we noticed a pattern. Almost all the animals that he could remember from school had names that sounded like the sound they make, or the sound they would answer to if you made it at them. For example, frog is wok wok, snake is butsuts, and cat is pish pish, which sounds very similar to the ps 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 noise we make today when getting a cat's attention. We made the connection that this is a lot like Pokemon, because in the anime, Pokemon say whatever their name is. Then I had an idea. What if we made our own Pokemon game that could teach you things about Coast Salish indigenous life? Something that could bridge the gap between tradition and today. The first thing I did was figure out legal shenanigans, because I notice a lot of fan games get shut down. I wondered if anyone had bothered to ask the Pokemon Company why this happens, so I did some investigating and I asked them directly. I got into contact with a guy who works in Seattle at one of the Pokemon Company international offices, and he told me that fan games will get shut down because they rip assets or code directly from existing games made by Game Freak or the Pokemon Company. We had a discussion, and it was agreed that I could make a successful fan game that wouldn't get shut down if it 1. Doesn't steal any sprites, assets, etc. 2. Features mostly, if not all, original content. 3. Is transformative in that it is used as a tool for education and contains some comedic parody material. 4. Has family-friendly storytelling suitable for an E or E10 game. 5. Is not being profited from monetarily, especially in such a way that would create a competing product. 6. Ultimately uplifts the Pokemon intellectual property by generating interest and showcasing beneficial aspects of it, including but not limited to entertainment, education, and positive community experiences, which are outlined in the Pokemon Company's values and mission statement. I also suggested that I not use RPG Maker and Pokemon Essentials to create this, but instead construct things from scratch and program in Unity. To set this game even further apart from Pokemon's usual visual style, I settled on an isometric layout because battles are already kind of isometric. After our discussion, I was given a more or less official stamp of approval, and I felt satisfied enough to begin the project. Welcome to Fakemon Thunderegg. This game will take place on the island of Okalus. Okalus gets its name from the Lushootseed word for purple, which is T'akalus. Just like Seattle got mispronounced and became the name of a city, so too did this region. It's a succinct way to demonstrate how a native word, when used frequently by a lot of different people who speak English, changes. Naturally, this region is heavily inspired by Coast Salish indigenous land, specifically Washington State. The mountain at the top is based on Mount Rainier. The nature preserve is mostly based on the Hoh rainforest, and there's even a fairground as a reference to the Puyallup Fair. The fairgrounds are next to Pacific Northwest farmlands, too, so there's going to be a lot of apples. The story begins with a desperate call. You play as a detective who seeks to solve the mystery of how and why a field scientist went missing. You are the last hope of his friends, family, and Pokemon, and it's up to you to travel from town to town investigating leads. On your journey, you're joined by a starter of your choosing, a starter you find in the trash, and whatever other Pokemon you might like to join your team. I would like the capturing process in this game to work more like it does in Legends Arceus, where it isn't just weakening a Pokemon through battle or lobbing a quick ball at it. Also, I've always wanted a game where some of the Pokemon will join your team willingly, whether they like being petted, or whether you happen to impress them with how strong you and your team are, or maybe you have something tasty in your inventory that they can smell. Because I miss Pokemon-Amie and Pokemon Refresh, I want to bring those back, but in a different way. I don't want to lose the challenge of the game by giving Pokemon too many advantages after receiving a few Pokepuffs and head scritches. It's also going to be a challenge to recreate this feature in pixel artwork, as I don't want this game to be in 3D. I think it's achievable, but it's going to take a little bit of finagling. To make it easier on the artists, programmers, and other creators I want to work with, I want to do more with less. There will be less than 200 Pokemon in the entire game, less areas to explore, and less characters to interact with, but there will be more ways to bond with your Pokemon, more in-depth ways to explore the environment, and more interesting dialogue options with NPCs. I like the idea of having less than 200 Pokemon because it reminds me of the original 151. The "gotta catch 'em all" slogan used to feel more real and more achievable, and I want to bring that back. As a kid, 151 was a huge number. I remember we had a Pokemon poster in my kindergarten classroom with the entire list on it with pictures. I could barely count to 100 back then, let alone 151. Also, this is a controversial take. I don't want to catch the legendary Pokemon. I want to form some kind of reverent relationship with them, possibly, and I also want them to remain in the wild. The legendary also has to have a believable impact on the story and characters. It can't just be something that was shoved in awkwardly at the last minute. The one that I have in mind for this game happens to be the study subject of this region's professor. Having a memorable professor is important, because they are one of the first characters you meet and your first impression of the game and its story. In Fakemon Thunderegg, I imagine the professor is a grumpy but charming old lady with an eye patch. She's an indigenous woman whose surface Pokemon is a regional variant Xatu, and they both wear matching cedar hats. She's also suspect number 1 in your investigation. The rival is also an important part of the Pokemon experience. It's been way too long since we've had a rival that was just awful. I need this guy to be somebody I would fight in a Denny's parking lot, or any Waffle House, inside or outside, on the roof, with a steel chair. I need to have problems with this man, and I need to solve those problems by obliterating his team and sending him packing. Here is a handy list of other things that would make the experience of playing this game really fun and wonderful. Multiple save files. You can turn off EXP share. No IVs. I don't like the idea of grinding for Pokemon with nitpicky stats, especially when the processes for doing this are uncomfortable at best. I like the idea of finding a special Pokemon and bonding with them and making friends with them, as opposed to throwing them away if they don't measure up with the math. More opportunities for Pokemon to willingly join you on your journey. The ability to go on full odds shiny hunting, or make shinies easier to find depending on what playstyle you prefer. Overworld shinies. Being able to see Pokemon out in the wild, interacting with each other and their environment. Following Pokemon. Skippable tutorials and cutscenes, but with an option in your menu where you can go back and play them again if you missed them or forgot something. Fully animated cutscenes with voiced dialogue, especially if they're funny. Having voice acting for these scenes will really bring out the comedic timing and opportunities for great line delivery. It also makes sense because Pokemon has lacked voice acting for many years, and it adds to the immersion of the game. A charming train for fast travel between towns. A beautiful day and night cycle that includes dusk and dawn. Doing side quests that visibly improve the world around you and mark your progress. Good food! Hear me out. For the past few games, food has increased in importance, and I think that adds to the flavor, pun intended, of the region it takes place in. I love to see appetizing food in video games, and since this takes place in a native region, I propose the regional dish here be fry bread. Fry bread is a very important part of our culture. You can serve it up with meats, with cheese if you want to, but in this region I think it would be fascinating if it was covered in berry jam. Lushootseed and Coast Salish culture is baked into the game's lore. I think it would be really cool if some NPCs only spoke in Lushootseed, and as you learn the language in the game, you can go back and understand what they're saying. Other games, such as Metroid, have created super cool fictional languages that people have a great time cracking the codes of, so why not introduce the same idea in a game that features a real language? Springboarding off that last bullet point, none of the educational elements of this game should hinder or irritate the player. The best way to teach in a video game format is to have information available that is interesting, discoverable, and rewarding, especially if it's done through clues and puzzles. Players should be encouraged to get curious and creative as they explore and learn. In general, the features that I want to focus on the most are story, lore, exploration, quality of life improvements, immersion, suspension of disbelief, and bonding with Pokemon. It is through these elements that we can create a game that is both enlightening and enjoyable for players of all ages. In summary, I am a passionate indigenous artist who seeks to teach people about my cultural heritage through a Pokemon-style game. I am currently in the beginning stages of development as I draft and design a brand new region and original characters to achieve this goal, by combining the wisdom and knowledge of Coast Salish people with a timeless and well-loved franchise. I believe we can create a unique experience that is both familiar and altogether new. Stay tuned, everyone, because our journey through Oculus is only just beginning. Well, that's it for this video. I'll see you on the next one when I talk about the starters of this region. Until next time, check out my Patreon, eat your vegetables, and have a good day.